Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today we're going to be doing another sort of movie review and discussion, and in this one I'm pretty excited because I think there's a really interesting writing device that was being used throughout this film that I want to discuss and highlight. So you might be able to quote unquote steal it and use it in your own writing. But before I get into all of that, as always, I just wanted to give a quick spoiler warning. Today I'm going to be discussing the film Rental Family. And this is one of those films that if you haven't seen it and you have any interest in it, I highly recommend going and checking it out, watching it first, and then coming back to this video because it benefits from going into it totally blind. So yeah, but if you've seen it and you're ready to discuss it and sort of debrief our thoughts on it, then let's jump right into it. So yeah. All right, so now that we can sort of just openly talk about this film, let's just say it. What an amazing film. I was super surprised by this one. I haven't actually seen The Whale yet, but I know that Brendan Fraser's sort of return to acting in The Whale was critically acclaimed, and one day I do want to check it out, but I just feel like that movie looks like it's so emotionally devastating that, to be honest, I'm a bit afraid to actually check it out. That being said, I went into this movie sort of apprehensive. Part of it was I was sort of went to see it for the sort of joke of, oh, is this movie just going to be a Rent a Girlfriend copycat? I'm not super familiar with that anime, but I know it's sort of controversial. But I know the basic premise is a guy basically rents girls to pretend to be his girlfriends, and it turns out that in that sense this movie actually is very similar because both are about the same industry of basically hiring out actors to play some sort of role in your life to sort of fill a void and kind of deal with loneliness and stuff like that. So that was interesting. So since I went into it with that sort of attitude, I was, amazed by how deep and beautiful this movie is. But also, I'm a bit apprehensive of like feel-good movies. I feel like the classic feel-good movie is sort of a dying film style or genre. Because they tend to be a little bit too cheesy and a little too corny that like at the detriment of its plot. I feel like I was trying to think about this when I was sitting in the theater about like what was sort of the death bell for the feel-good movie, and I feel like it was probably The Blind Side, which at the time it was released, I thought that movie was pretty well received, but now is pretty universally hated and not looked back on fondly. And so that's sort of like found family type vibe and, mixings of culture and learning about other cultures. In real life, that stuff's all great and wonderful. But in terms of storytelling, it just tends to be very cheesy when it's done by, Hollywood and stuff like that. But this movie was none of that. It was certainly feel good, but it felt earned. It had actual drama to it, actual twists and turns, and you didn't know where it was going, and it was very emotional too. I felt like what's interesting about this movie is, as you can see, there's a pretty large cast in terms of different characters and character types who don't actually really blend with one another. So you sort of have like different stories that are being told parallel of one another. So you have, Brendan Fraser's whole story as Philip. He's an American actor living in Japan who was sort of a failed actor and seems to have some sort of darkness about his past, some sort of depression and things like that. And so he's the one who gets this job. And then you have one of the jobs, he has to fake be a father, and he has to convince this little girl that he truly is her father, because his client is actually the girl's mom. He has a sort of shut-in guy who he doesn't have a lot of friends, and so Brendan Fraser goes and plays video games with him. We have Kikuo Hasegawa, who is a retired actor who seems to be suffering from some health issues and potentially like dementia or Alzheimer's, some sort of memory issues. And so Brendan Fraser has to pretend, or Philip has to pretend to be a journalist who is writing a whole sort of piece about this actor. But again, it's all fake. And a couple others, because he takes on a bunch of the jobs, but also we see as all that's going on, there's also drama with his sort of co-workers of Aiko and Shinji, who are also rental family employees and running into their own issues. And so as the movie goes, each of these plots sort of has their own rising action, climax, and resolution. And so as a result, there's just a ton of emotion and a ton of payoff and a ton of drama throughout the whole thing, because right when one might seem like it's stagnating or getting slower or resolving, the next one picks up, and as it jumps between them all, it keeps it being really engaging. So it also has amazing pacing. And it's sort of cool because I feel like a lesser movie really would have done it where Philip gets the rental job, does a couple of them, and then gets the one job where he's pretending to be the father of this little girl. And I feel like the movie would then just focus on just that rental thing, and that would be like the real meat and bones. But in this movie, all of his different sort of setups and different, assignments all get pretty fair real estate. The little girl one and the actor are the most, but truly we see he keeps up with all of his different jobs, and that's what keeps this, being extremely interesting, and it keeps you going. So, the cinematography is great. I kind of liked it. It sort of had almost a documentary vibe. Some of the camera work was like intentionally shaky and sort of following Philip around as he navigated the city and things like that. And as a result, I honestly at times sort of forgot that I was watching a fictional movie. It doesn't have any sort of like mockumentary features where there's, B-roll as one of the characters is being interviewed or something like you would see in The Office. But it's just filmed in a very like raw, real way that you kind of forget that you're not actually watching just this business of rental family and seeing them interact with different people. I totally could have pictured this being like a real documentary, and just as a real documentary crew would follow the rental actors on their different assignments and then pick a couple of those assignments that they could see would be interesting in a documentary. It felt the exact same way, but in a fictional movie. So yeah, I want to now talk about some of the more specifics and kind of get into that, and also get into that writing technique that I mentioned earlier. So something that I thought was really interesting is one of the biggest sources of drama is that the true client is not always the customer. And that sort of is the situation for both the little girl and the actor, which is that for the retired actor, Hasegawa, Philip is actually hired by his daughter because she sees that her father is sort of deteriorating and depressed and wants to sort of cheer him up in thinking that he's not going to die in obscurity, unremembered for his, acting roles. And then same with the young girl. It's actually her mom that hires the rental family, and so she doesn't want the little girl to know, because she thinks if the little girl really believes that her father's come back into her life, then she'll like pass this test and get into a really good school, because the school you need to have 2 parent figures and all that stuff. So that immediately sets up a really interesting drama, because normally with his other rental jobs, the person who hires him is the person who wants the rental person. So the person hiring is the client and aware. So in that sense, usually, such as we see in the opening wedding whole arc, where in which Philip has to pretend to be the groom for a woman who wants to leave her family and sort of escape with a relationship with her lesbian fiance, and her family seems to be not accepting of that. So she fakes this whole heterosexual marriage to sort of appease her family, and then she can claim that she's moving off to, I think, like Canada. And so in that sense, the bride knew the whole time that Philip wasn't actually her groom and all of that. And that seems to be how the business is normally set up to be. But with these two, since there's that drama, the whole time you're sort of thinking, oh, is he going to get caught? What happens if the young girl sees him being a father figure to someone else? Same with the actor. What if the actor sees Philip now pretending to be a dad, or just any other role, and he's like, I thought you were this journalist from America, and all of that stuff. So there's a ton of drama there, and it's sort of funny because it is an extremely hard sort of hole to write yourself out of as the writer, because how do you resolve sort of a conflict like that? Because since Philip isn't this girl's father and he's not even a family friend or anything, once the girl realizes that he's just a stranger, he is just a stranger. But as he does these jobs, we see that he gets more and more emotionally invested in sort of the clients. So, you can see that he basically starts to think of the little girl as sort of like an adopted daughter. And you can see that he sort of emotionally is prepared to be there for her for life and really support her growing up. And, as the audience, we realize, like, well, this is just a temporary assignment, and eventually he's going to have to go away, and he has all this emotional connection. And same with the vice versa. He's eventually going to have to abandon this young girl again because he isn't her father. I feel like in a different movie, he would be the brother of the father or something like that. So then it could still resolve as like, oh, they're still family. But so how do you resolve this in a satisfying way? And I think the movie did a really good job of the actor dies having never known that Philip wasn't actually a journalist, but Philip goes on this kind of grand adventure with the actor Hasegawa, and helps him go back to his childhood home and uncover some photos and relics and go through memory lane one last time before he passes away. And in that sense, I think it's resolved well, because also since the actor's an older man, Philip seemed less emotionally invested beyond their fake dynamic of being basically friends. He thinks of him as a friend, and it's revealed at the end that he sort of thought of him as a bit of a father figure, but not to the full extent as this sort of father-daughter relationship that he has. And in the other one, unfortunately, the girl does find out that he's an actor, and it sort of devastates her emotionally for quite a while, but eventually she sort of comes to terms with the fact that her mom did it with good intentions, and it's actually Philip who then reaches out to her and sort of clears the air, and it's implied that they remain friends and that he's going to be a supportive role in her life, just not on payroll. So he did a good job. But something I want to talk about that I think is sort of interesting is that writing device thing. So something that's sort of interesting that I realized about this sort of like feel-good movie is, I don't know about you guys, but I find these sometimes to be like very exhausting watches, which seems weird because it seems like it should just be something you just throw on and, you feel good, it's chill, it's relaxed, the stakes are low. But usually, like I said, I'm emotionally exhausted and almost like physically exhausted by the end of the movie. And I realized that something that a lot of feel-good movies do is similar to what horror movies do. So they're actually very similar in terms of a sort of structure of pacing and whatnot. So hear me out before you click away. So in horror movies, the whole thing is about rising tension. Rising tension to the great climax. So basically the climax being the ultimate moment where the monster is revealed and, the hero has to run away from the monster or fight them or whatever. But before that, there's constantly little fake outs or hints of the tension, and a big thing they do is they sort of build up tension, and then they don't give you the full catharsis because it usually ends up being nothing. So, as an example, someone is home alone and they think they hear weird creaking footsteps upstairs. And so they slowly go up the stairs and they see that the door is cracked open and there's just a little light in there. And so they walk down the hallway very slowly. The music's getting more and more sort of a tense droning. They slowly push open the door. And in the audience, you're sort of, leaning forward in your chair and you're getting ready for this explosive, boo moment, this jump scare. But nothing happens. And then they look around the room and they see that the window is open and rain is getting in. So they go over and they close the window. But after they close it, they hear a little bit more of some sort of weird scratching sound. And they realize it's coming from behind the bed. So they slowly go over to the bed and then get on their knees. And the way the camera reacts, we can't see what's under the bed. We're focused on the face of the protagonist, and the music gets tense again. And then as the camera slowly starts to pan to under the bed that's full of shadows, it goes lower and lower and lower, and then boom, a cat runs out of the bed, and the protagonist goes, enter cat name here, you scared me. And the whole point is that you had all this tension in your heart and all this anxiety leading up to this big scary reveal, and it doesn't happen. So you're sort of rising, and then an immediate crash. But then something else scared. Maybe the phone starts ringing downstairs. They start going downstairs, crash, and keeps going and going until finally you get that big climax. Well, similarly, with feel-good movies like Rental Family, they kept having moments that felt like it was going to reveal something horrible. So a big moment is with that actor, Hasegawa. There's this scene where they go to his old home and they're alone, and Brendan Fraser's character Philip has kind of snuck the actor out of his home against the wishes of his daughter, and it's seen as being sort of an act of wrongdoing, but with noble intentions. So they go to the house, and as they're trekking through the forest and hiking, you're sort of like, how the hell are they going to get back home? And so they go and they eventually have to spend the night at the house. As it goes to show that it's morning, it shows these angry waves crashing along the shoreline, crashing against these cliffs, and then we get this aerial shot of just the littlest bit of this giant rock right before it's totally covered in water, and it almost looks like it could have been something besides a rock. And your immediate reaction is, oh no, did the actor have a dementia moment and wander off and fall into the ocean? And then how is Philip going to explain to everyone that he brought this old man out there and now he's missing and presumed dead and all of that stuff? So it's super high tension. And then it shows Philip wake up and he realizes that the actor's gone. So then you think, okay, this is for sure going to happen. The actor's actually wandered off. Where's the movie going to go? Because it seems to have confirmed your worst fears. So it's rising. But then you see the actor's actually just safely at this old tree that he had some connection to with his childhood. And it's also right next to this sort of time capsule that he buried. So then all this tension, but instead of resolving with a huge jump scare, you're instead resolved with a wholesome moment. So then you're like, oh, phew, he's fine, and oh, wow, he's having this emotional moment. But then you get more rising action where, oh, no, they figured out that Philip Philip's boss found out that he took the old actor, and he's furious, and he's, Philip's gonna get fired, he's in trouble. And then, boom, the old actor has fallen over and seems to be unconscious, but then he's fine. And it kind of keeps doing that, so it keeps sort of getting you emotionally charged up and up and up and up, so that then when there's the big climax emotionally, you're basically ready to sob along with the film. And I think one of the cutest and most wholesome moments of the whole movie, that's sort of the standout, which is sort of one of the climaxes of all this rising tension, is basically, so then Philip is arrested because they think that he had a hand at the potential death of this actor and kidnapping of him and all this stuff. And then his boss basically seems to abandon him. His coworkers quit because they're pissed at how their boss has handled this, and so the whole rental family company seems to be falling apart. And then you see that the other two rental actors, who are his coworkers, are pretending to be lawyers, and they're going to sneak in, and they're all afraid that they're going to get arrested for doing this sort of fraud. And they go to try to talk to the actor to try to help out Philip, and it's all this tension. And then suddenly a cop shows up, like a detective, and they're like, oh no, we're going to go to jail. We're in so much trouble. And, the family member goes to let in the detective, and they say, I think I'm going to puke. I'm so nervous. And they're like, don't worry, I'll take the blame. But they basically realize, they're caught. And then the detective walks in, and it's actually their boss, also in costume, pretending to be a detective to also help Brendan. And all of that tension and anxiety you have that things are going to go horrible, when it's relieved by finding out that it's actually a cute moment of friendship and, support and found family and all of that, it then instead replaces it with all of this warmth of oh my gosh, things are going to work out, and how sweet that he went to help. And so it's a very emotional movie in that way. So that's something to keep in mind when you're writing. And as I was discussing all of this, I thought about a plot twist from the movie that I have to discuss before I wrap this up. So I'm one of those people who can kind of annoyingly predict a lot of plot twists in movies. I feel like the more you study writing, the more you start to have sort of a pattern recognition where things are going, and as a result, you can quickly pick up on subtle cues of who's really the villain and stuff like that. And so it's rare for a plot twist to totally get me off guard, and whenever it does, it's such a great feeling, because it's that whole shock and awe. And Rental Family has one of those. So again, if you've been watching this and you haven't seen the movie, this is a really good sort of moment I'm about to discuss. So if you haven't seen it, I once again recommend you click off, watch the movie, and then come back so we can discuss it together. But there's your last minute spoiler warning. So, okay, so the boss of the whole Rental Family company has a scene where he goes home to his wife and kid afterwards. He talks to his kid about how he's struggling with a soccer game, and when you first see it, you're like, oh, okay, so maybe part of the reason why he realizes how important empathy and playing these roles is because he has his own family. And you sort of think, oh yeah, of course someone who is good at play acting, being a good father figure and stuff like that, would be a good father figure in real life. So totally flies under the radar, and you just think it's just a bit of character development. But then after Philip is arrested, and it's in this sort of chaos crisis moment, he goes home again, and your immediate reaction, or at least my immediate reaction, was, oh, I know the plot twist. It's going to be that this wife is actually a client with her son, and this whole time we've thought that he's been going home to this nice family, but he's just doing another job. He's just acting like the father figure for this family. Oh, what a good twist. And, they did an interesting way of showing that, because in the background, some of the characters talk about, would you ever do a rental thing as someone who works within the company and the sort of industry? And that's sort of a background conversation. So they all are lonely. None of them actually have families. And so we thought he had a family, but it's just another job. And then it hits you with the craziest plot twist, which is no, he's not the client. or he's not the employee, he's not the rental person. The wife and the son are both fake, and he's hired them. And that is such a crazy plot twist reveal that I did not see coming, that I was just like super impressed by the way they handled that. And the emotional development of what that does in the moment of you realize that this guy doesn't have a family and he doesn't have any other support system besides the company, and now the whole company seems to have fallen apart. So then the next scene we see is him pretending to be that detective, and it all makes sense because he's fighting to keep his own little family, his real kind of found family, together. And so it's just a beautiful moment and just like a crazy good plot twist. So I'm gonna give this movie just a solid 10 out of 10. I think it was phenomenal. I definitely want to watch it again. And again, the acting was so good that I kind of forgot that this wasn't a documentary, because I also, since Brendan Fraser had left sort of the acting spotlight for so long, part of my brain almost, I feel like, was sort of retconning it as like, this is what Brendan Fraser was up to before filming The Whale. This is what happened after he sort of left Hollywood, just because it was so authentic and so raw in the acting. Brendan Fraser, especially his acting, I feel like every time he acts, it just feels like it just breaks your heart in a weird way. He has this very like emotional way of talking that it almost always kind of sounds like he's about to, break down and start crying and weeping, but as a result it just makes him someone, deeply sympathetic, and you just want to root for him. So yeah, I almost wish this movie had come out a bit later around the holiday season, just because it feels like the perfect holiday film, because it's a total feel-good movie and it doesn't actually have anything to do with the holidays. But yeah, highly recommend it, and really can't praise it enough. So with that being said, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. If you guys enjoyed this and enjoy sort of doing these sort of chalkboard review discussions, it would mean so much if you could, consider subscribing and giving the video a like. It helps, grow the community, and as the community grows, we can have more sort of discourse in the comment section and just have more interesting dialogue as we both, share our thoughts and opinions on these pieces of work. So I would love to hear your thoughts if you've seen this movie in the comments. Did you also go into it thinking it was going to be a weird, like, they stole the plot of Rental Girlfriend, but made it that he's the rental person or something like that? Also, do you feel like this movie wasn't advertised enough? Because I certainly feel like it sort of flew under the radar. I really hope it gets more sales and stuff like that. And I can almost picture some Oscar nominations, except it almost feels like it's flying under the radar a little too much to get that, but it definitely like deserves some. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think, and other than that, I will see you in the next one.